Right now, this very second, you are wearing something. You did not think about it this morning. You did not weigh the decision. You just reached out, half asleep, and put it on, the way you have every single day of your life. It is the most ordinary thing in the world, and every human you have ever laid eyes on your whole life has been covered too. The lion, naked. The wolf, naked. The bear, naked. The ape that shares your DNA, naked too. But here is the thing nobody ever stops to ask. You are the only animal on this entire planet that does this, the only one. Every other creature alive wears the skin it was born with and nothing else. And then there is you, standing there, wrapped in something you made with your own hands. The single species that looked down at its own body and decided that its bare skin simply was not enough. So when did that actually happen? When did a naked, shivering ape become the one animal on Earth that covers itself up? The answer is older than farming, older than cities, older than writing, older than almost anything you think of as human. And strangely, we did not crack this mystery by digging up ancient clothes. We cracked it by studying something that was living inside them. No fabric survives that long. Cloth and skin rot away in centuries, not hundreds of thousands of years. So for the deepest part of this story, there is almost nothing left to dig up at all. The clothes are gone, which is exactly why scientists had to get clever and hunt for evidence that was somehow still alive. There are several layers to this story, and each one is stranger than the last. So let us pull them apart, one at a time. Let us go. Start with the part that sounds completely backwards. Before a human could ever put anything on, something first had to come off. Our fur. Every one of your closest living relatives is buried in hair, thick coats, head to toe. Chimps, gorillas, orangutans. And you? Basically bald. A shivering, exposed exception among the primates. And losing your fur is one of the most dangerous things a mammal can possibly do. No insulation, no protection from the sun, no shield against thorns, wind, cold, or teeth. No insulation, no shade, no shield from thorns, no armor against the cold. So why on earth would evolution strip us down like that? The leading idea is heat. Picture the African savanna, well over 1 million years ago, and one animal that simply refused to quit. Our ancestors became endurance hunters. They could not win a flat-out sprint, so instead they walked the prey down. They tracked it, chased it, followed it under a burning sun for hours, until the animal finally overheated and collapsed. And to run for hours without cooking yourself alive from the inside, you need to sweat, and you need to sweat a lot. Fur traps heat, bare skin sheds it. So we made a trade. We gave up our coat and we got the best cooling system of any large animal alive. Millions of sweat glands, smooth, bare skin. It made us absolutely relentless. No other creature on the planet can do what we do. A horse will outrun you for a mile and then quit. A cheetah is finished in under a minute, but a human in decent shape can keep moving hour after hour after hour in heat that would drop almost anything else alive. We are, without exaggeration, one of the finest long-distance endurance machines evolution has ever built. And the price of that machine was our fur.
The genetics hint that all of this happened a very, very long time ago, possibly more than 1 million years back, when our ancestors' skin darkened to survive under the newly exposed sun. But here is the trap we built for ourselves. That cooling system is flawless for a hot African afternoon, and it is a death sentence the very moment the temperature drops. On the savanna, being bare is a superpower. Step outside that warm band, though, into a freezing night, a high mountain, a northern winter, and the exact same skin becomes a liability that can kill you in hours. We had optimized our entire body for one single climate. And then, restless as ever, we decided to walk away from it.
A bare body loses heat terrifyingly fast in cold, in wind, in the wet. And our ancestors were about to walk straight into ice. Out of Africa, into the freezing north, into winters that should have killed us.
So there it is, a body built for blistering heat and a plan to march into brutal cold. Something had to give. And that something was the very beginning of clothing, which brings us to the strangest detective story in all of human evolution, Because the first real evidence of clothing is not a scrap of fabric at all. It is a tiny insect that has been feeding on us for hundreds of thousands of years. Here's a fact that will quietly ruin your day. Humans carry 3 completely different kinds of lice, and each one lives in a different neighborhood on your body. One lives in the hair on your head. A second lives in coarser body hair. And the third one, this is the important one, does not live on your body at all. It lives in your clothes. Sit with what that actually means. There is a parasite that evolved specifically to live in human clothing. It grips fabric, not hair. It tucks its eggs into the seams. It literally cannot exist without something for us to wear, which means a clothing louse could not have existed one single day before clothing did. So if you could figure out exactly when that louse first appeared, you would know almost precisely when humans started covering up. And that is exactly what a team of scientists set out to do, not with shovels, with DNA. They compared the genes of the clothing louse and the head louse and measured how far the two had drifted apart. Because when a population splits off into a brand new home, its DNA slowly starts to change, tick by tick, like a molecular clock. The logic is beautifully simple. Two groups of the same creature once separated can no longer trade genes. Tiny mutations pile up independently on each side at a fairly steady rate. Count the differences, divide by that rate, and out falls a rough date. Only here, the thing that split them was not a mountain or an ocean. It was us, inventing something to wear. Wind that clock all the way backwards, and it points to a staggering moment. The clothing louse appears to have split from the head louse around 170,000 years ago. 170,000 years, long before farming, long before writing, long before the first city was even a dream. Our ancestors were already wearing something regularly enough to grow their own dedicated parasite. And the timing is almost poetic, because right around then, the whole planet was tilting into a brutal ice age. The world was getting colder, harsher, and hungrier. And at that exact pressure point, we started covering our skin. Now science is honest about its uncertainty, and so am I. That louse date carries a wide margin. Some estimates push it earlier, some later. It is a clue, not a confession. But it lines up with something else. Because our ancestors were not the only humans out in the cold. Someone else was already up there and had been surviving European winters for a very, very long time. The Neanderthals. Here's something that genuinely surprises people. The first clothes were not sewn, they were not woven, they were not tailored, they were just draped. A dead animal's skin thrown over living shoulders. And it almost certainly was not fashion. It was desperation. You are cold, you are dying, and there is a fresh hide right there, still warm. You do not invent a garment. You just do not freeze to death tonight. There is nothing noble about it in that first moment. It is raw and bloody and cold. But somewhere inside that shivering, desperate act, a line gets crossed. For the very first time, an animal is using another animal's body not as food, but as shelter it can carry with it. That single idea will go on echoing for the next 100,000 years. This is the part that always gets missed. There is a huge gap between using a hide and actually making clothing. A draped skin slides off. It rots. It does not fit. It cannot keep out a real winter. To survive the ice, a skin is not enough. You have to work it. And working a hide is an entire hidden technology. Scrape off the fat, stretch it tight, soften it, treat it, dry it, cut it. Turning a dead animal into something wearable is a genuine craft, one that takes knowledge, tools, and time. And when archaeologists went looking, they found the fingerprints of that craft. Not the hides themselves, those rotted away tens of thousands of years ago, but the tools that shaped them. In a cave in North Africa, researchers found specialized bone tools, smooth and rounded, shaped almost exactly like the instruments leather workers still use today, and they were roughly 120,000 years old. Alongside them lay the bones of foxes, wild cats, and other small animals, species with fur worth taking, but not much meat worth eating. In other words, our ancestors may have been hunting some animals mainly for their skins. A fox, a wild cat, a skull in the dirt, a hide on a frame. 120,000 years ago, someone looked at a fox not as dinner, but as a coat. That is not survival instinct anymore. That is planning. That is a mind that thinks about the future. And the Neanderthals were doing exactly the same, wrapping themselves against a cold that would kill an unprepared human in a single night. Think about the sheer effort hidden inside one warm garment. Someone had to track the animal, kill it, skin it without ruining the hide, scrape it clean before it spoiled, soften it over days, and only then cut and shape the thing. That is not one skill. It is a whole chain of them, handed carefully from one generation to the next, around countless fires, in a language we will never get to hear. But their clothing was almost certainly simple. Wraps, capes, tied and draped skins. Effective but crude, with gaps that let the cold slip in. Because the one thing that turns a draped skin into a real, fitted, sealed garment had not been invented yet. That single invention would change absolutely everything. It was small, it was sharp, and it was a revolution. The needle. Specifically the eyed needle, a sliver of bone with a tiny hole punched through one end. It looks like nothing at all, and it is one of the most important tools our species has ever made, because a needle does not just poke holes. A needle lets you sew, and sewing lets you do something a draped skin never could. It lets you join separate pieces together into a shape. A sleeve, a hood, a sealed seam a freezing wind cannot cross. The oldest needles we have found are astonishingly fine, some of them tens of thousands of years old, made by hands that understood tailoring in a way that still impresses experts today. And this is where clothing stops being a simple blanket and becomes a machine for survival. Fitted, sewn clothing traps a pocket of warm air right against the skin. It seals out the wind. It can be closed tight at the wrists, the neck, the ankles. Layered right, sewn clothing does something quietly remarkable. It builds a thin, invisible bubble of your own body heat and holds it against your skin everywhere you go. You stop fighting the cold head-on. You start carrying a little pocket of warm air with you, straight into it. It turns a fragile, hairless body into something that can walk through a blizzard and live. And the moment we had that, the whole map of the world cracked wide open. Suddenly, the frozen north was not a wall anymore. It was a door. Humans pushed into Ice Age Europe, into the Siberian cold, across frozen land bridges, into territory where the temperature alone should have stopped us dead. And we did not stop, because we were carrying our own portable climate right there on our backs. Think about how insane that is. A tropical animal, built for the African sun, walked into the coldest inhabited places on Earth and thrived. Not because our bodies changed, because our ideas did. Let that land for a second. Genes need thousands of generations to adapt a body to real cold. A good coat takes an afternoon. Clothing let us skip evolution altogether to survive places our biology had no business surviving, faster than any mutation could ever hope to manage. It may be the first time in history a species outran its own DNA. Clothing let us change what we could survive without waiting to change what we were. In a single generation, a human could go from vulnerable to unstoppable, just by learning to sew. And once we could make clothing, we did something no other animal has ever done with its covering. We started using it to say things. For most of this story, clothing meant animal skins. But somewhere along the line, humans figured out something even stranger. You could take a plant, tear it into fibers, twist those fibers into thread, and weave that thread into cloth. Take a plant, tear it into fibers, twist the fibers into thread, weave the thread into cloth. In a cave in the Caucasus Mountains, researchers found tiny fibers of wild flax, spun, twisted, some of it even knotted, buried in layers around 30,000 years old. Not skins, thread, made by hand from a plant deep in the Ice Age. And here's the detail that stops you cold. Some of those fibers were dyed. Turquoise, pink, gray, black, colors pulled from plants and pressed into thread by people who had no cities, no writing, and no metal. Think about why you dye a thread. Not for warmth. Color does not keep you warm. You dye it to make it beautiful, to make it yours, to make it mean something. 30,000 years ago, someone wanted their thread to be turquoise, and that quietly changes the whole meaning of the object. A skin keeps you alive. A turquoise thread says something. It says, "This is mine. This is who I am. Look at me." It is decoration, yes, but it is also the birth of an entire language, one spoken purely through what we choose to put on our bodies. That is the moment clothing quietly changes what it is. It stops being only a tool against the cold. It becomes decoration, identity, a signal. Something you wear not just to survive, but to be seen. And once you start looking, you see it everywhere. Carved figurines from the Ice Age show what look like woven caps, belts, bands, and straps. Tiny beads, pierced and sewn onto clothing by the thousands, turn up in ancient graves. People spent hours, even days, decorating what they wore. In a world where every single calorie mattered, they still chose to make their clothes beautiful. Some Ice Age burials hold thousands upon thousands of individual beads, each one drilled by hand, each one sewn into place. The time that represents is staggering, maybe months of work for a single outfit. Nobody pours that kind of effort into pure survival. You pour it into meaning. Because by then, clothing was not only about the body anymore, it was about the mind, about who you were and who you wanted everyone else to think you were. So let us zoom all the way out, because this is so much bigger than fabric. When our ancestors put on that very first hide, they did something no other animal had ever done. They stepped outside of what evolution had given them. Every other creature is stuck with the body it is born with. The polar bear cannot leave the Arctic. The camel cannot leave the desert. Their skin decides their entire world. But we looked at the limits of our own skin and said no. We will make our own. Clothing was the first time a living thing chose its own environment instead of being trapped by it. It is the same instinct that would one day build houses, keep and carry fire, sail across oceans, and eventually leave the planet entirely. It all begins with a cold, naked ape making a decision that no gene ever told it to make: to take the skin of another animal and wear it as its own. And notice what clothing quietly did to us in return. Once we could dress, we could hide our scars, our status, our age. We could pretend. We could perform. We could become someone we were not. No naked animal can do that. A lion is always, exactly, a lion. It cannot dress itself up as something braver or older or more powerful than it truly is. But a human in the right skins could become a hunter, a leader, a spirit, a stranger. We did not just cover our bodies. We started editing the story that other people saw. Clothing did not just keep us warm, it gave us a second skin that we could control. A mask, a costume, a whole story we could tell about ourselves without saying a single word. Clothing did not just keep us warm, it gave us a second skin that we could control. A mask, a costume, a whole story we could tell about ourselves without saying a single word. We lost our fur maybe 1,000,000 years ago. We were working hides 120,000 years back. Our clothing louse appeared around 170,000 years ago. We were sewing tens of thousands of years ago, and dyeing thread around 30,000 years back. Not a single invention. A slow, stubborn, 100,000-year climb out of nakedness, driven by cold, by hunger, by migration, and eventually by something as human as simply wanting to look good. Each layer solved the problem of its moment, and then quietly became the foundation for the next one. Cold demanded a covering. Migration demanded a fit. Society demanded a signal. And every one of those old pressures is still stitched invisibly into the clothes hanging in your room right now. And every single layer of it is still on you right now. The instinct to cover up, the warmth trapped against your skin, the color you chose this morning without even thinking, the quiet message your clothes send before you ever open your mouth. You are the animal that refused to accept the skin it was born with. That is not a small thing. That is the entire story of our species, wrapped around your shoulders every single day. So the next time you get dressed, half asleep, not even thinking, remember what you are really doing. You are performing 170,000 years of survival, invention, and imagination in about 4 seconds, without even noticing. You were never just getting dressed. You never were.